Here on my channel, I really do have a strong conviction to keep things real. I want you to feel authenticity when you come here and watch my videos, and I want you to know that what I'm sharing with you is the truth about homeschooling and what it's really like. And in today's video, I'm going to be chatting about some things that you are not going to hear about on Instagram, some truths about homeschooling that aren't overly popular, but I guarantee that all of us are actually dealing with. So if you're curious, keep watching. Hello friends, I am Christine, a second generation homeschooler. If you're new here, that is who I am. I have been homeschooling my kids for 6 years now, and I was homeschooled from the age of 10 all the way through till I graduated. And I love homeschooling. I love the homeschool community. I love curriculum. I love all the things that are about homeschooling, and I love to chat about it, and I love to share things that I am learning. So if you want more of that, if you want curriculum reviews and tips and advice and just real life updates about what it's really like, please go ahead and subscribe. I would love to have you here. But today, let's just jump right into these. I was thinking about this and thinking about the truth of homeschooling, what it's really like to homeschool your kids, because I think that there is an element of protectiveness in the homeschool community where we don't like to talk about the hard stuff too much because we don't want to put off people who want to homeschool their children. We don't want to make it sound too difficult. We also don't want the homeschool community to get a bad name because things aren't like all butterflies and rainbows. And we want to portray something very positive to the outside world. And while it is commendable to want to encourage new people and to come into the homeschool community, we do everyone a disservice by not being honest about it. Because here's the thing, homeschooling is really hard. It is a challenge. It is not for the faint of heart. And it is going to make you feel uncomfy in all sorts of ways because it stretches and grows you as a parent, as a mother. And so we just need to be honest about it. So I'm going to chat about some things. Some of these might be a little controversial. I know a few of them will be, and probably will press some people's buttons, and that's okay because I'm just sharing what I believe is the truth. And I think it's really healthy to discuss it. And I also have a strong belief that when you keep things in the dark and you keep them hidden, they continue to have power. But if you bring them out to the light, then it's easier to tackle them and to figure out a way to work through it. So let's be honest and chat about these things. Number one, I know this is going to push on some buttons because I see it spoken about all the time. It pushes on my buttons, but in the opposite way to how a lot of people think. All right, so this is it. Homeschooling is a privilege. And I know that like really annoys a lot of people to hear that because they're like, I have to sacrifice so much to homeschool. So here I'm going to add on to that. Homeschooling is a privilege and it is a sacrifice. It is both. It is not one or the other. I think it's really important that we acknowledge both of those things. So I sacrifice a lot to stay home with my kids. I sacrifice time and energy and potentially more income if I wanted that. There's a lot of things that we have to work for in order to homeschool our children. A lot of families give up a second income. They reduce their house size and a lot of material things we give up. In some cases, you have to sacrifice relationships with people who really disagree with you, and that can be very challenging. However, that doesn't mean that it's still not a privilege to homeschool your children. And I think it's really, really the wrong mentality to think that it's only a sacrifice. There are many countries around the world where it is illegal to homeschool your children. Completely illegal. It's not an option. You will be put in prison for doing it, or your children will be taken away from you. There are circumstances where families have fallen apart and it's not possible to homeschool your kids. There are situations where one spouse is adamantly against it and you can't homeschool your kids. There are so many reasons people cannot homeschool their children. And I do think it is wrong to stand there and point the finger and say anyone can homeschool if they want to, because that's just not the reality. I think in a privileged place where you actually have the choice to homeschool, yes, I do think a lot more people could make the sacrifices required to homeschool their children. But it's just wrong to say that everybody does have that I also think it's great to see it as a privilege because then you go into it with a spirit of gratefulness. Instead of thinking, I have to do spelling and math with my children, we can think of it as, I get to do these things with my children. I get to determine our day-to-day schedule. I get to choose which resources we're going to use as a family. I get to have all this extra time with my children. It completely changes your mindset when you go into it with a spirit of gratefulness instead of thinking, I'm sacrificing so much so that I can be with my children. And the other point of view I can see this coming from is a spirit of defensiveness. Like people look at you, oh, you're so lucky you can homeschool. Well, it's not that luck has a lot to do with it, quite frankly. It is privilege and it's also sacrifice. But we shouldn't be wearing our sacrifice as a badge of honor and walking around like I've sacrificed so much in order to homeschool my children. No, because the reason we homeschool isn't about us. It's about our children and what is best for them and what we feel called and convicted to do. So, little soapbox on that because I see it brought up all the time. And I just think it's wrong to be on one side or the other. It is both. It is both a privilege that I get to homeschool my children, and I also sacrifice quite a bit in order to do that. But it's a sacrifice I am more than willing to make. We can apply the same mentality to having children in general. It is not a right to have children. It is a privilege that we get to have children and that we get to raise them. We also sacrifice an awful lot in order to do that. That's my first point. Number 2, parenting is much harder than homeschooling. I think I've spoken about this quite a bit on my channel if you've followed me for a while, because I don't really see homeschooling as something separate to parenting. I see them as one and the same. I mean, you teach your child how to tie their shoelaces, you teach them how to wash behind their ears. I just don't really see educating them as separate to that. I think that comes from us having the mentality of school being a separate thing to parenting for such a long time now. But really, it was all down to the parents right from the beginning. And I would say that when I look on Facebook groups and different forums where there's question and answer type things, I would say that 80% of the questions that homeschool parents come up with or the troubles that they're struggling with actually don't have a lot to do with educating their children as much as they have to do with parenting their children. And I wanted to bring this up because I also see a lot of the time people saying, well, homeschooling is just not a good fit for us because of such and such a problem. Often it's like a clash of attitudes between parent and child, or the child not listening, or things like that. And their default reaction to that is, I need to enroll my child back in school. And the problem with that is that the problem actually doesn't go away. You're just removing it from your home for a certain number of hours in a day. And I'm not talking about your child being the problem. I'm talking about whatever issue you have with your child. It's just giving you less time to have to deal with it. And I know that can sound really harsh, but it is the reality. Our parenting struggles don't just disappear because we're putting our kids in school for a certain number of days. They still need to be dealt with. You know, some families, there are definitely circumstances where school is going to be the right option at that time in life. Parenting is hard. It doesn't matter where your child is located. It might give you a bit of a reprieve to have them in school, but the issue doesn't go away. There's still going to be conflict in the home, and it's still something that's going to need to be dealt with. So it's really helpful to know that when you're homeschooling your child, that instead of seeing this as a homeschool problem, we can see it as an issue that you need to work through as the parent with your child. It really does change the whole focus, and it keeps everything in the right perspective. Number 3 is that curriculum is not nearly as important as you think it is. So I know we as homeschool parents, we love to talk about curriculum. I love to go on a researching rampage and look into all sorts of different curriculums that are available. I mean, I can talk about curriculum for a very long time. My channel, so much of what I share is about curriculum, but we shouldn't give it too much credit because the reality is that curriculum is a tool and it can be as effective or as ineffective as us in the way that we're presenting it to our children. We need to be really careful that when we're looking at homeschooling our kids and whatever issues we're coming across, that we don't think that a curriculum is just going to be a magic fix-all, because I've been doing this for 6 years now and I can guarantee you that is not the case. Yes, some curriculums do work better for certain kids than other kids. A lot of the time they work better for me as the parent though, and that is why they work better for my children. So don't put too much stock into curriculum. This is really, I really aim this more towards new homeschooling parents, because it's very easy to use a curriculum that everybody around you has recommended and then think, what on earth am I doing wrong that this isn't working with my child? A lot of the time, the curriculum isn't the problem. It's just that your child might need something presented in a different way, or they need to developmentally catch up to certain things. I have taught 3 kids how to read now. I'm right in the throes of it with my 6-year-old at the moment. And all 3 of my children have learned at a different pace. They've all struggled with different aspects of it. They've also struggled with some of the same aspects of it. They're all different. And I've used lots of different curriculums. And at the end of the day, reading is a process that takes time. And lots of different curriculums are great, but understanding how reading works and a child learns how to read really is where it's at. And then it's just consistency and discipline and time and all of that. But at the end of the day, the curriculum is simply a tool. It's not a magic fix-all, and it's not going to resolve the conflicts that you have with your child automatically. Sometimes it does, but most of the time, those are heart issues that really need to be worked on just one-on-one together and have absolutely nothing to do with the curriculum you're using. Yes, it can cause issues. Yes, it can be a fantastic fit, but don't give it too much power, because that's not actually where the power lies. Number 4 is that your education is just as important as your child's education. And by this, I mean that your ongoing education is just as important. So I'm not talking about what you come to the table with when you first start homeschooling, because we all have different levels of education at that point. I'm talking about your ongoing education, because 6 years ago when I started homeschooling my kids, I knew far less about education than I do now. So when you come to the table and you're like, wow, I feel really overwhelmed because I know very little about the science of reading, even though I can read fluently, doesn't mean we necessarily know how to teach reading well. Or I don't know much about teaching math facts or conceptual versus procedural. Those were foreign concepts to me when I first started homeschooling. I really didn't know much about it at all, but I educated myself. And that is so important as the parent, to be constantly educating yourself about how to be a good educator, how to teach your child. We are not just the facilitators of their education. We should not just be showing up and handing them a book and trusting that all is well. That's just not how it works, especially when our kids are really little. We need to be active participants in the process of their education. So for instance, my son, he's recently started using IEW Structure and Style, which is an online writing program. And the teaching is all done via videos, and then he does his own work. And really, it's almost completely independent. That doesn't matter. I'm still over his shoulder looking at what he's learning and why he's learning it. I want to understand the program so that when he comes to me with issues, I'm there to answer the questions, or I know where to go to find the answers for those questions. It is going to give your child a much deeper and richer education when you yourself are equipping your mind with the knowledge that you need to teach your children. Do you have to be a master at everything? Absolutely not. But we definitely can improve our education just like our kids do. And it happens naturally. So much of it isn't even intentional. But when you are intentional about it, that is truly powerful. Number 5, this is not something that you see on Instagram. And I'm going to share it because it is something that I will die on this hill. Consistency is way underrated. Way underrated. And I think that this really stems from a society that is now being brought up on constant dopamine hits. We are being conditioned through the use of social media and devices to constantly be receiving this stimulation and dopamine hits. It's never ending. And so we're just used to that. We're used to getting instant gratification and not having to wait too long for anything or having to persevere too hard to get anywhere. And unfortunately, that is trickling down into the homeschool community now because, like everything else, it's online. There's a huge online homeschool community where you are constantly fed these images of beautiful homeschool spaces and nature study and children who just sit around and adoringly look at their mother while she reads to them aloud. And while there are definitely beautiful elements to homeschooling like that, the reality is that the true work in homeschooling is showing up every day, being intentional, and having consistency with teaching your children and teaching them despite the challenges and the hardships. We don't give up, we continue, and we pursue what we know is going to be so good for them. That is not what the world is telling us right now. It's telling us that when we get bored with one thing, we should jump to another thing. If it's not making us feel good, we should try something different. And if it's not working right away, then obviously we're doing something wrong and we should try something else. And I will just say that in the experience that I have thus far, and in my experience of being homeschooled myself, the true reward came from being consistent and putting the work in and day out. I honestly would rather say to a new homeschool parent to just do a small amount and do it disciplined and do it each day and build up from there, rather than trying to do all the things and all the pretty stuff and then just fall off the bandwagon, because that will happen. You will burn out. So do little to start with and do it well and be consistent, and it 100% will pay off. It really does. It's not something that you're going to see online. You're not going to see that in the pretty pictures that are posted on Instagram, because it's not fun and exciting. It's not shiny and new. It's just hard work sometimes. But over time, I do think it gets easier. And as a result, your family knows what to expect each day, and it just flows a lot more smoothly. And then my final point, and this one really is just kind of a funny one because it's very Instagram-ish, and that is that not everybody is gonna love nature study. And that's okay. You don't have to, really. With the influx of homeschoolers online and pretty images, nature study is one of those things that tends to be everywhere. You know, it's in so many different homeschool styles, but the one that obviously jumps to mind is Charlotte Mason homeschooling. And I actually love so much of the Charlotte Mason method, but nature study is just not something that comes naturally to me. Does it mean that my kids don't love the outdoors and they don't see things in nature? No, absolutely not. They are out there every single day. They're outside right now. I just had to tell them to be quiet just a minute ago so I could finish this video. They are exploring constantly. It is second nature to children to go outside and explore. So if you are not somebody who goes on daily nature walks or has a big wall in your house that is just filled with birds' nests and rocks and sticks, that's okay. You're still doing a really great job at homeschooling. Not everybody has to love nature study. So I thought I'd just throw that in there at the end as something that is a little bit funny, because I know that there are some of us sitting here who are like, want to love nature study, but really it's just not your thing. But we don't want to speak too loudly because the nature study people really like nature study and it looks very, you know, like authentic homeschool. But I would say that most homeschoolers aren't frolicking in the fields most of the day. We do actually have to sit down and do our math and English and all of that kind of stuff. But that's the side that is portrayed on Instagram the most. You just get either beautiful curated bookshelves or, you know, children frolicking in the fields. And there doesn't seem to be that in between, or that side where actually mom's like losing her mind a little bit and everybody's too loud and fighting. And, you know, you just all need a break from each other for a second. Because that's also the truth of homeschooling. You have the beautiful side and you also have the hard side, and all together they make something really beautiful when you're working towards a common goal. So my heart behind sharing these was just to encourage you that Instagram is not where it's at. I know that we all know that, but I think it's very easy to get trapped into that feeling of inadequacy when you're constantly being fed that. I do want to encourage you that if that is how you feel, if you're feeling discouraged by that, to step away from it. There is this whole blame game that goes on with the online world and social media where people say, well, this is not fair and this person's making me feel this way. No, the power is actually in your hands. You get to put your device down and say, I'm not looking at that. Be a good example to your children because they're going to have to grow up and deal with that as well. And to see healthy habits being set in the home by you as the parent is just so powerful for them and will leave long-lasting marks on their minds. So, thank you for watching. I hope it was encouraging to you, and I'll see you in my next video.
What if
Bye.
the world had more of your smile? What if the wind could spread your love? What if your sweetness could reach everyone? There'd be no wars.